An airport is just a shopping mall where the customers are legally required to show up 2 hours early and aren't allowed to leave. Think about that for a second. You have a captive audience, stripped of their bags, their belts, their dignity, and their sense of time, with nothing to do but spend money. Sounds like a license to print it, right? So let's talk about what it actually costs to own one. Here's the first thing most people get wrong. In the United States, almost no airports are privately owned. They're run by government authorities, port authorities, city agencies, quasi-public bodies that answer to politicians, not shareholders. But that's not the whole story. Because globally, airport privatization is one of the most lucrative and quietly insane investment categories on Earth. Heathrow, Charles de Gaulle, Sydney, Schiphol. Dozens of major international airports are either fully or partially owned by private investors, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, infrastructure conglomerates. The model works like this. A government decides it doesn't want to manage a massive piece of infrastructure anymore. It sells a 30, 50, or 99-year concession to a private operator. You pay billions up front. You collect the revenue. You maintain the asset. Simple. Except nothing about it is simple. If you asked someone how airports make money, they'd say, planes, landing fees, gate fees, fuel. Airlines pay to use your runways, your terminals, your gates. And they're right. That is technically the biggest line item. But here's what they don't tell you. Airlines are brutal negotiators. The major carriers, United, Delta, Ryanair, have enormous leverage over airports, especially in competitive markets. If your fees are too high, they threaten to reroute. And a hub airport without a major carrier is just a very expensive parking garage. So many airports run their aeronautical operations. That's the technical term for the planes and runways side of the business. Essentially at cost, sometimes at a loss. Which raises an obvious question. Then where does the money come from? The food court, the duty-free store, the parking garage, the hotel attached to the terminal. The advertising on every surface a stranded traveller will stare at for 45 minutes because their connection got delayed. This is called the non-aeronautical revenue model, and at a well-run international airport, it can account for anywhere from 40 to 60% of total income. Think about it like Las Vegas. A major casino doesn't make its real money on gambling. Gambling is the loss leader. It's the reason you walk through the door. The real money is the hotel room, the restaurant, the concert ticket, the bottle of water that costs $9. An airport is doing the exact same thing. The runway is the casino floor. The departure lounge is everything else. Heathrow generates over £700 million a year from retail and property alone. Singapore's Changi, consistently rated the world's best airport, has an indoor waterfall, a butterfly garden, and a movie theatre. That's not hospitality. That's yield optimization. The longer you keep passengers inside the terminal, the more they spend. Every design decision, from the gate location to the bathroom placement, is calibrated to maximize time on property. Your customers can't leave. You might as well charge them for the privilege of staying. So far, this sounds pretty good. Captive customers, diversified revenue, infrastructure monopoly in a major city. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. Building or acquiring an international airport requires one of the most aggressive capital structures in the entire investment world. We're talking about debt loads that make leveraged buyouts look conservative. Heathrow Airport Holdings, the company that owns the UK's busiest airport, has carried over £16 billion in net debt. That's billion, with a B, for one airport. And this isn't unusual. Airport privatizations are almost always structured around massive upfront concession payments, financed with long-dated bonds and layered debt facilities. The logic is seductive. Airports are monopolies with predictable cash flows, so you can safely lever them to the eyeballs. Which works, right up until it doesn't, because airports are also one of the most event-sensitive assets on Earth. Think about what kills airport revenue. Not slowly, immediately. A pandemic. Passenger volumes at major international airports fell 60, 70, 80% in 2020. Overnight, the fixed costs, debt service, staff, maintenance, security. Didn't fall. They couldn't. You can't pause a £16 billion bond obligation because nobody's flying to Ibiza this summer. Fuel price spikes. When jet fuel surges, airlines cut routes. Fewer routes means fewer passengers. Fewer passengers means your duty-free store is selling perfume to airport staff. Geopolitical events. A conflict, a diplomatic breakdown, a travel ban. Your international terminal goes quiet. Regulatory changes. A government decides to cap your landing fees, or mandates expensive infrastructure upgrades, or, as happened at several privatized airports, decides the whole experiment was a mistake and starts the renationalization conversation. This is the airport owner's nightmare scenario. Not that the business model doesn't work. It does. But you need it to work every single year, with no gaps for 30 years. Because that's the length of your debt structure and your concession agreement. There is no skipping a year. There is no waiting it out. The Trump Taj Mahal, the biggest casino in Atlantic City when it opened, collapsed under $675 million in junk bonds within a year because the revenue projections that justified the debt never materialized. An airport with the wrong capital structure, hit by the wrong external shock, faces exactly the same math. More debt than the business can service. No way to cut costs fast enough. Lenders getting nervous. The asset doesn't disappear. Airports don't go away. But the equity, your equity, can get wiped to zero while the debt holders restructure around you. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Airports are not a business for people who need the investment to work out. They're a business for patient capital. Pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, infrastructure specialists with 30-year time horizons and no pressure to show quarterly returns. The Ontario Municipal Employees Retirement System, OMERS, owns a stake in London City Airport. The Abu Dhabi Investment Authority has infrastructure exposure across 3 continents. These aren't investors who panic when passenger numbers dip for a quarter. They buy airports the way other people buy bonds. Slow, predictable, inflation-linked returns over decades, with the added kicker of commercial upside if they run the retail operation well. If you are that kind of investor, airports are extraordinary. If you're not, if you need yield now, if your debt has covenants, if you bought at the top of a cycle, airports will teach you the same lesson they've taught every over-leveraged operator in history. The planes keep landing. You just might not own them anymore when they do. So should you buy an international airport? If you have $16 billion, a 30-year time horizon, a pension fund's patience, and a very good duty-free retail consultant? Maybe. If you're financing it with junk bonds and expecting the traffic projections to hold, you're not buying an airport. You're buying a very expensive lesson in what happens when a monopoly meets a pandemic. The runway will still be there. You probably won't.